Once upon a time, we start with the story today. Once upon a time, there was a man who had gotten weary with worldly life. Okay, let me know if you can relate, but I saw a meme the other day that was like, the main insight of adulthood is that you just never stop doing dishes. Has anybody ever had this feeling? Yeah, so this is, my partner went away, she's in charge of dishes and I do the cooking. And so usually it's that I feel you never stop going shopping and cooking and composting. And she probably feels like you never stop doing the dishes. But anyway, he had this realization, he grew world weary and he said, I'm gonna be a hermit and go out and live in the woods because the world is wearying to me. So he goes out into the woods and he begins to find out, if you've ever tried to live in the woods, he begins to find out that you have to hunt and gather and clean and walk the perimeter. And it's work to be a hermit in the woods as well. So he's in his heart, he's like, gosh, what am I going to do? I'm world weary. Now I'm woods weary as well. And he's out on his hunting and gathering one day and he hears a noise over the little rise. And so he quietly creeps over the rise. And what does he see but a mountain lion? But it's just sitting there. It's just sitting there. He's like, okay, I'm a little freaked out, but I'm going to see what's going on over here with this mountain lion. And the strangest thing, out of the woods comes this fox, and it's got a little rabbit in its mouth, and it comes up to the mountain lion and leaves the fox at the mountain lion's feet. Right. Oh, leaves the leaves the rabbit, thank you, at the mountain lion's feet. There's a hermit, there's a fox, there's a mountain lion, there once was a rabbit, but now there is lunch. I'm sorry vegans, I should have did a content warning. But anyway, it's the law of the wild, apparently. So he's like, what is going on here? And he realizes that the mountain lion is injured and this fox has brought lunch for this mountain lion who can't hunt for itself. He's like, what is this? And this epiphany rises up in him. I don't know if you've ever tried to be a hermit in the woods. Some of us have, who shall remain nameless. But you go into some altered states out in the woods and you, oh, I think I figured it out. My hermitage is bearing fruit. And he's like, this is because I was calling in my heart for the answer to my weariness. And the divine has sent me this vision. I am meant, we're all meant to lay still like the mountain lion and let our sustenance come to us. This is a sign the divine will bring us everything we need if we just relax, man. And so he goes about it. He stops hunting. He stops gathering. It's getting a little cold in the cabin. He hasn't gathered any wood for a while. He gets a little hungry. He hasn't gone down to the stream for a little while. And he's like, nope, but I had an epiphany. He's still riding high. Okay, technically, I later learned this is a form of hypomania, if you want to look it up in your DSM-5. But he's still riding high on the epiphany. Oh, the divine will bring us everything we need. But he's getting a little thirsty. He's getting a little chilly, getting a little hungry. And about day 3, he goes, oh, this isn't working. And so he calls out from his heart in his hermitage. Oh, divine, why have you misled me? Why have you not fed me like you promised? And a thunderous voice comes from above and it says, should I do a thunderous voice? Foolish hermit, I meant for you to emulate the generous fox, not the injured lion. Okay, like many of these old Zen teaching stories, there are a lot of lessons that are encoded there. But I wanted to share this story, well, because it's a fun story, but I believe it points to some aspects of our practice of democracy and civic power. It's very easy, at least for me, maybe y'all are more advanced than this, but I think it's going around a little bit. It's not just me. It's easy to think that like democracy, we the people stuff, like you invent it in 1776, you place a seal upon it of the United something or others, and then it's a thing. And you don't really have to worry about it anymore. You know, you vote every now and then, you know, or not, but the democracy will preserve itself. The divine will take care of it. You lie about like an injured lion, and the divine will bring you democracy for lunch. And those of us who have thought that way are delusional. We had an epiphany, and it was a delusional epiphany. Okay, what's in bold here says, democracy is not a static something you can have, but rather something much more active, dynamic, and engaged. Maybe we should think of it more like a process, and it is specifically a participatory process. Okay, you've heard this terminology, participatory democracy. Do people still say this, participatory democracy? Okay, cool. Head nods, but no hand raises. I'll try my modeling more enthusiastically. Have you heard of this term, participatory democracy? Hey, that it feels good when you can't see anybody's facial expression. Although there are a couple really big smilers, and I see your mask deforming, so thank you for that. Okay, participatory democracy, though, is redundant. This is my main proposal to you today, is that the term participatory democracy is redundant. If it ain't participatory, it ain't democracy. Okay, obviously, this is going to require constant input and change and upgrades because society is a complex system. Complex systems are things like the weather, right? They have trajectories, but you know, I have a weather app now on my phone. I finally went over to the new, I didn't go in the past to March 7th, like we said, but I've gone forward into 2022. And I check the weather app because I got to know whether I got to cover the wood pile or how much time for traffic and stuff like that. But you know, that thing is only good for like 3 days, really, because weather's a complex system. Same thing with traffic. Traffic is a complex system. There are going to be trends. Rush hour is probably going to be rush hour. But then sometimes you're like that one time I had a flight to catch and I lived in Santa Cruz and I was at the San Jose airport and I was like, well, it's not rush hour, we're fine. And there was a rush hour at non-rush hour. Can you believe it? Yeah, of course you can. You've driven in the Bay Area. Come on now. So same thing with democracy. There's kind of a trajectory and there's stuff that we've said and aimed for and aspired towards, you know, government by the people and for the people and of the people. And then random stuff comes in. And then those very people are like, hey, what if we had an authoritarian fascist government that took away your rights? And then you have to figure out like, wait, if the government is by the people and for the people and the people are for fascist tyrants, what do you do then? It's a complex system. Okay, before you freak out, it's only like a small portion of the population that are actually for tyrants. There's a number of people who vote along party lines and so happen to vote for tyrants, but they've been deluded. And there are then just a sliver of sociopaths. Oh, that has to get edited out later, excuse me. Don't process your feelings in the sermon. Just give the sermon full of feelings. It's a hard job these days. I'm not sure about this double bind. Back to the script. That's why they give you a script. So it's a complex system. It's going to need continual change because forces come along and try to erode democracy. So power is alluring. Power is alluring. And what we want to know today is that power is good. We tend to think we have these expressions in our common sort of vernacular, right? You know, oh, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And they are pointing to something. They're pointing to one of the needs that we need to intervene and upgrade democracy as the people. But when we intervene and upgrade, we are also trying to take the reins of our civic power. The contrast that we need to make is that democratic structures, such as enshrined in our fifth Unitarian Universalist principle, the right of conscience and the use of democratic process in our congregations and within society at large. The reason why, like that's in our living spiritual tradition, right? In the middle there is do democracy. And there's a reason for that because democracy ideally, it aims for and claims to be about a power with dynamic rather than a power over dynamic. And this is a really big difference. So the title was People Powered Peace. And then he's like, but democracy, democracy. The reason where those connect is that while they're totally flawed and we need to upgrade them, and like we're going to probably move into some post-democratic modified consensus in 3D web 3, you know, multiverse of something or other, like yes, and so far it's the most non-violent system, the most non-coercive, the most consent-oriented system of leadership and co-leadership and co-governance that we've developed. It's the best one we know so far. So power with versus power over, but you know, power over is attractive. So today's service is about the fact that you can't just leave it alone. You can't go, well, you know, we wrote some documents about power with, and okay, those documents were written by slave owners and their wives couldn't vote, but hey, democracy's been set down, we put a stamp on it, and you can just let it run now. It doesn't work that way. It had systemic flaws built in. And then the places where it worked well, the part of humanity that does think power over brings more security is constantly going to act to try to erode power with. Because power with feels insecure. Like there's something really weird. And maybe it's because we've known this at least for like the last like 5,000 years of most the human societies that have led to what we now call Western culture, right? For about 5,000 years, they've been doing this. Leadership is concentrated in the hands of the few, whether they be counts or burghers or, you know, dukes and earls or whatever. Leadership is concentrated in the hands of the few. And then the many sort of funnel resources toward those people. This is a template that's been set down for a really long time as the structures of our culture that aspires toward greater equity. So we've still got a lot of work to do, or we're just going to kind of fall into the default. You know, we're just going to have a society that somehow some small group of people gets to concentrate 48% of the world's wealth and help to write the laws that make the political system work in a way that the people who have the wealth get to write more laws, right? We're like teetering on the edge of feudalism. But knowing that participatory democracy is redundant is actually a little bit heartening, because it's not doing that. We're not, you know, we didn't transition from free market capitalism into crypto oligarchism because we screwed up. That's actually just how the system goes. Like, if those who love peace don't learn to organize as well as those who cherish war, those who cherish war are going to exercise their power while we're sitting around waiting for someone to bring us a rabbit for lunch. So people powered peace, because that's the only way you get it. Okay, so it's a little heartening to me to recall that democracy needs upgrades. The status quo tends to get toxic just by its nature. So this is where people-powered movements come in. When the status quo is found to be iniquitous or unethical, right? Some of the things, they were just written into the founding documents of your nation, iniquitous, unethical, or some were put in more recently, and voting rights that were finally gained are being slowly edged out through these cute little secretive means. To challenge the status quo requires very specific methodology. Okay, so what I wanted to share with you today is this concept of the ecology of activism. How many of you, class, have heard of the ecology of activism? All right. Oh, good. A fresh canvas upon which to paint. Okay. The ecology of activism, really simple. So let's say, I don't know, there were people shouting some nonsense down the road in front of Phil's Coffee, of all places. And they were some kind of phobic, and they were blah, 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 shouting that. Now, if any of you knew how to play the bagpipes, you would be the perfect little flower in the ecology of activism. Because while they're out there, they got a megaphone. You should fear so-and-so. Because you're so scared, you should hate them. But you're not actually the hateful one. It's them who's hateful, and that's why you should hate them. Right? And they're doing that. And what you should do is go stand a non-threatening distance away. I practiced my bagpipe impression for many years. I don't only advance slides, I also do bagpipe impressions. Thank you. Thank you very much. So if there were one of you in this group, that would be a really cool cactus to have in our ecology of activism. But then some of you don't play the bagpipes. And so you're like, oh no, there's nothing that I can do. But some of you, like, you know somebody on the police force. And so, like, okay, I know you radicals, you don't want me to hear me say this, but part of the ecology of activism is having like one kind of well-meaning Karen who can, beep, boop, boop, hey, there's some hate mongers down here at the Phil's Coffee, and they're really disturbing my peace of mind. I'm a taxpayer here in Los Gatos. My family has lived here for many years. I'm a voter, and these guys are really disturbing my peace of mind, and somebody has to do. Really important part of an ecology of activism. And then some of us, some of us should do systemic change behind the scenes. We should write petitions. We should organize a march to demonstrate the opposite as loudly as possible, right? You can't really demonstrate the opposite while they're there on the megaphone. You just get out the bagpipes. But then 2 days later, you do the march, right? And then some folks need to sit around and like think, how the heck did this happen? What sort of ideologue has been pushed forward in media and social media to make this a reality in downtown Los Gatos? And how do we make the opposite happen, right? We need all kinds of soil builders and mycorrhizal something or other and bioswales to sink water into the thing, and then a hugel culture with the tree that fell down and it's growing for the next. It's an ecology of activism. What do you think? Make sense? Sold? Okay, because you're in it now. So I'm going to talk to you about ecology of activism using an ancient Himalayan yogic structure, mostly because that's easy for me. Mark told me a while ago I should do more talks that I didn't prepare very well for, because that one I gave was pretty good, I guess. And so I was like, okay, what can I do that I don't have to prepare for? Oh, I'll use the old memorization system that they ordained me in. So this is an ancient system, and just quickly, in the ancient world, they often use systems of correlation. And these, you should know, as I tell you to this, these are not like one-to-one sort of truths. The systems of correlation were memory tools in like pre-literate Europe, where the bards, the story singers, the story carriers, they would learn everything through memorization. A lot of time, the meanings would be enfolding. So one symbol would correlate to all of these other meanings, and that helped you learn it more easily. And they work for, if you do like Jungian dream work and stuff like that, these correlation systems are how they use that in the ancient world. So it's a system of inquiry. This is called the 5 Buddha families. I learned it through Tibetan Buddhist culture, but it's older than that. So let's see, can we see my cursor? They cannot at home, but you can't up here. Anyway, let's start with the yellow one. The yellow one, yellow is like, or let's say gold, because it means riches. So let's say like the riches Buddha family. And what they, in the olden days, this was like the pre-modern, what is it, Myers-Briggs, right? Are you an introvert or a extrovert or a whatchamacallit or a thingamabit? So this is like the old fashioned, they say. So, oh, are you in the riches Buddha family? Well, how would you know? Well, because you love the finer things in life, and you're also sort of innately regal, and this various system of correspondences. So what I'm going to present to you is that these are your power holders and people of privilege. These are your power holders and people of privilege. This is an important part of your ecology of activism. These are the Karens. We got a couple of them in the congregation. The good the carings, right? And they can call the cops. They can call their friend on city council, right? Because they are stakeholders. They're power holders. These are people whose parents were able to put them through college and give them a political science degree. And then they got a job. And so they actually know how to pull the levers of power in the way that lasts for a while, doesn't just erupt and then go away. This is a very important part, often overlooked aspect of the ecology of activism. Okay, thank goodness, though, that's not the only one. Then the blue one, these are associated, so that was associated with the earth element in ancient times. The blue one's associated with the water element in ancient times, and it's really the reflective aspect. And these are I'm gonna call them the critical theorists, So if you're gonna have a movement, you have to have people who figured out that something is terribly wrong with the way we're doing things, right? Otherwise, anybody can rouse a mob of soccer hoodlums, right? But to rouse good-hearted folk to make change, you actually have to expose, this is a big piece that I drew from our textbook for this quarter, Bill Moyer's Doing Democracy. So I drew from his movement action plan. The first step is to expose incongruities. When we say that all men, okay, let's go back in time. When we say that all men are created equal, blah, 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 and then men with a certain skin color are not treated equally, someone comes along and exposes like, hey, these things don't match. These things don't match. You need critical theorists. And then of course, we've moved on to a lot deeper work than that now, thank goodness. But you need these critical theorists to find and then point out incongruities between what we say. Hey, we're a society that values freedom, and what we do. We're a society that earns some of its bread and butter from a school to prison pipeline, which is a modern Jim Crow and legalized slavery. These things do not match up. Okay, that's the blue one. Then we got a red one. Try not to get too serious or it's not a fun sermon anymore. So the red one is the fire element. And I'll call this family the peacemakers, So think of the fire as like the warmth in your heart, or like the hearth fire. So if you're going to do direct action tactics, campaigns, you need people in the first aid tent. You need them. These are the warm-hearted peacemakers. You need the resistance chorus, because they're like vibes watchers. They're like, hey guys, let's raise it up again. Come on, do the song that raises the vibe. Here we go, right? You need both blockade holders and you need vibes creators. And this is the red open heart peacemaker family. More on them in a second. Last one's the green ones. This is the wind element, and this is called the action Buddha family. So these are the folks who, if you're like, hey, we're blockading this thing, we're chaining ourselves to a pipeline, are you ready? They're like, yeah, I was ready yesterday, buddy. These are direct action enthusiasts, Often they have a certain type of privilege in the health of their body. Often they're willing to call into work if they have that kind of job, or they've made themselves a kind of job where they can just, nope, we're going to South Dakota. Sorry, there we go. You're gonna need some direct action enthusiasts in your movement. And then finally, the one in the middle this is called the Buddha family. And these I'm gonna call the visionaries. So if you are going to do all this work, you also need someone kind of like somebody like Thich Nhat Hanh. If you know who Thich Nhat Hanh is, there's a great, I should have loaded that picture up with him and Dr. King hanging out doing peace work together. But Thich Nhat Hanh was really cool because he was like this total Buddhist monk, but his thing was engaged Buddhism, doing social action and doing the inner work to make nonviolence even possible without like repressing yourself and kinking yourself into knots, but to actually generate peace so that you had something to export. So we need these visionaries. We also need people who know the bigger strategy, who can actually step back and look at the whole thing. We need an ecology of activism, right? Because sometimes it's just too many jobs to stand back and look at the whole thing and be able to zoom off to South Dakota, stand back and look at the whole thing and also see how it's incongruous and then still feel warm-hearted enough to explain that to your political opponents in terms that they'll understand with compassion in your heart. That's really hard to do. So you get some people who are natural peacemakers. And what could be cool is that instead of, so do any of you think you're a natural peacemaker family? Are any of us in the peacemaker tribe? Okay, you don't have, we're not going to assign you anything if you raise your hand. So if you're in the natural peacemaker tribe though, and the thing to watch out for is if your critical thinker friend comes along and they go like, oh man, things are so screwed up and we gotta cut it all down and we gotta, they come at you with some weird postmodern theory that you're like, that seems really extreme. Try not to shut them down just because they're not your part of the garden. And similarly, when you're a direct action enthusiast and you're like, we gotta go knock down some stuff at the public library in Los Gatos. Okay, you probably won't be saying that, but just for extreme, you're a direct action enthusiast and then your peacemaker buddy is like, hey, have we tried talking to anybody first? I mean, just have we tried? Like, don't discount your peacemaker as being like complacent or satisfied with the status quo. Oh, you're such a moderate. Oh, gross, right? We need them in the ecology of activism, right? So it's really kind of cool because then once we get to this, I hope that you can find yourself somewhere in this list, right? Some of us have like rising signs and sun signs, and my Mercury is in direct action. My rising sign is peacemaker, but my sun sign is critical theorist. And also, but my North node is in space holder. So like you can have a whole, okay, was that too weird? Okay, you can have a whole zodiac of where you land in the ecology of activism. This is really cool. So just to ground it down and go back and watch the recording if you didn't get those notes, because I'm just excited and I put a lot of things into these very short talks. In this movement action plan, I just wanted to review this with you because it gives us a map of how to strategically take up the levers of our civic power when we need to bend our collective moral arc toward justice. So in the book, Doing Democracy, it's your textbook for this quarter. And he says there basically it boils down to 4 stages: expose, educate, mobilize, and continue the struggle. Expose means you're pointing out incongruities. We say we do this, we say it's a free and equal society, and yet if we allow people to concentrate wealth as well as have the power in that, then you have people who really can just sit on their butt and gain more wealth than they could ever possibly give away. And that can't be a meritocracy, because you couldn't possibly earn that much money if you were being paid like by the hour, like the rest of us. And so we say, hey, everybody's got the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unless it comes to healthcare, in which case I don't have the right to life. And if it comes to mental health care, I don't have the right to the pursuit of happiness. Oh, and if it comes to, if you can pay a fine for it, then it's not actually an equal law if you're wealthy. So I don't have the right to liberty as well. That's an incongruity, right? So first step is expose, and you need critical theorists to get out there and go like, hey, this doesn't match. Really cool. But then you need to educate. The second step is you expose and then you educate, because I could stand up here all day and to a lot of you, I could say like, oh, isn't white privilege and gendered privilege and sexual orientation privilege. So isn't it a bummer that cisgendered heterosexual white men demonstrably have more power in our society than people who aren't some combination or the lucky draw of all 4 of those, right? But if you haven't seen that data, it won't make a dent at all, right? So I can think I'm here exposing it, but I actually have to educate you. I have to learn, are there words that you can understand? Are there life experiences upon which we can relate? Otherwise, I'm just telling you my religious myth about the privilege of people who look like me. We need educators. That's where the peacemakers come in. You need this part of your ecology of activism. You need to mobilize. Okay, direct action tactics. There we go. You've exposed, you've educated, and now you've educated enough of the groundswell of the population that you can do a demonstration. You can make such a big march that the government or whoever's in charge of the stuff you're opposing goes, whoa, they could really shut down the streets. They could actually shut down the streets. You could get so many of you arrested that you can go, wow, we just overflowed the prisons. And now our punishment paradigm has nothing to threaten people with. And you could demonstrate your civic power. You could walk out. You could boycott. All of these mobilization. You need courageous direct action enthusiasts to mobilize. Once you've mobilized, though, don't think your work is over. That's back to lesson 1 of today's class. The participation continues. And the great news is that this is where people of privilege play a very important part. One great example, you got to be careful with these because sometimes people say, oh, that was the cause. But one great example, I was reading a great book on the LGBT rights movement, and they point out that there was a big pivot in social perception when Ellen came out on TV. Does anybody remember this? There was like, and the mistake to make is to go like, oh, see, Ellen did it. No, dude, there were centuries of work. But once you've got someone with a camera on them, who's got a big old megaphone, helps that she was like also a peacemaker, but it mostly helped that she was a star. She was in the aristocracy of our society. And this is how one of the big ways that you continue the change that you've set into motion. Continue the struggle. We need people to write these things into laws. Martin Luther King Jr. did not say, well, I won't meet with President Johnson because he's a person of privilege. He said, I'll meet with President Johnson so that he can write the Civil Rights Act into law. And that didn't finish the work, but it was the step of continuing the struggle. Okay, in closing, because I'm over time, where do you start? Well, anytime you hear yourself saying someone should do something about that, notice that you have a chance to review and upgrade your understanding of civic power. And I was watching a great TED Talk by Eric Liu. I highly recommend watch the TED Talks from Eric Liu. And his suggestion is start with your city. There's no better training ground to learn civic power than starting with your city. And so, of course, please do start with your city. And we're also going to vote in midterm elections. And we're also going to march and we're going to do all this stuff. But I thought, what if we started even closer to home? Because you are in a volunteer-run organization. You're sitting in the building of it right now. It's as close as your next breath, your chance to participate in democracy. And so if you came to this church and you go, you know, that Reverend Fajun, he gave a pretty good sermon, but I've got about 5 notes on his presentation. Well, good job. There's both me and a Sunday service committee and a committee on shared ministry that you could go to. You could give them your notes and you could start a process of change. Or if you have positive feedback, please also share that, because people never share positive feedback and some of us need it. Sneeze on the truth. If you're like, wow, I really wish the board would do more. I don't think anybody's saying that right now because they know how much our board is doing. But guess what? Those are elected positions. And you could do more as a member of the UUFLG board. Amazing. So democracy, the power of the people, power with, is as close as what happens at coffee hour. And in this way, we can practice what I believe are holy powers. I think that these belong in our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles because they are how people with inherent worth and dignity relate to a deeply interconnected world and do so peacefully, with dignity, and in a consent-forward way. Okay, thanks for letting me go over time. That is our sermon today on people-powered peace.